Welcome back. It's another episode of Eat This, Not That. As a doctor leading tens of thousands of people clinically, hundreds of thousands of millions across the globe on heart health, really large masterclass heart health breakdowns, cholesterol comes up all the time. So much misunderstanding. If you're suffering from cholesterol, if you're concerned with your heart health, someone in your family members had a heart attack, a stroke, or some kind of heart-related issue, I can almost guarantee it. The number one food, I polled our large audience. Which food should we be eating for our cholesterol and for our heart? And the number one answer, Cheerios. It doesn't even make my top 100, and I'm gonna break it down for you today on why that is, change your thoughts on Cheerios, show you what to eat instead, and even give you some resources if you are suffering with cholesterol issues to get to the bottom of it. I saw my dad suffer with heart problems. My grandfather died of a heart failure. So it's near and dear to my, pun intended, heart. So I wanna break this down for you. Cheerios, why they are not a good idea and very far from heart healthy. So let's dive in. The Cheerios box. It's always interesting how General Mills has got away with this. Back in the day, this is in the 2000s, they paid Provident Clinical Research to run a small study that monitored the diets of study participants for 12 weeks. And a clinical evaluation of their cholesterol levels showed that when they coupled Cheerios with a reduced calorie diet, it significantly helped their LDL cholesterol levels. You change the diet of a bunch of people and you also fed them Cheerios. When it's calorie restricted, there's not tons of calories in Cheerios, so you can get away with that. And you're making them not eat a lot of food the rest of the day and their cholesterol got better. What? Yeah, hold up here. That's not the Cheerios. That's the fact that you finally got standard American diets or people around the world to eat less, which means they go into autophagy. Great video, by the way, you can check out on my channel. Autophagy is the process of your body going into recycling mode because when you stop giving it all kinds of raw materials, it's got to figure out, hey, how can we just use what we have laying around here? Let's clean up the scraps. Let's clean up the garbage. Let's clean up the microbes, the viruses, the bad cells, the old cells, the plaque. And it uses that. When you restrict calories or when you fast, whole older series, you actually have your cholesterol levels change significantly because the body starts to go into cleanup mode. So Cheerios right out of the gates, but they can blast that on the box. Same great taste, lowers cholesterol. In some regard, they're having that big heart on there, right? And showing the impact that Cheerios has on the heart. That's why we eat it. Now, here's the issue. Actually, in 2009, the FDA said, General Mills, you gotta back off a little bit because you are claiming that this is the ultimate heart healthy food. You gotta soften it. And so they're allowed to say these claims of cholesterol, lowering cholesterol levels, heart healthy, as long as they always pair it with a well-rounded diet and exercise regimen. Because that's what their study said. So, number one out of the gates, it's a very shady study that they paid for and had it done, and it was actually more to do with the caloric intake than it was to do with the actual Cheerios. But here's why Cheerios themselves, for the little kids that I see walking around with little tubs of them, right? Your grandbabies, your kids, and they're got their little cup full. This is breakfast for so many kids. I was my breakfast, okay? I get it. So I'm not shaming you or judging you. However, here's why they're a really bad idea. Let's dig into it. Whether you're picking the honey nut version, which in my opinion tastes a lot better than the regular Cheerios, there's problems all around. And the biggest one out of the gates is just the sugar content. In 1 cup of Cheerios honey nut, you get 12 grams of sugar. Just one. Who eats 1 cup? Man, I remember when I was a kid, I used to take like the big bowl from the cupboard. This is my teenage years, and it's like there was 4 cups at least of Cheerios in there, a bunch of milk. Side note, however, no one's just eating 1 cup, and maybe your 3-year-old is. And then even 1 cup of the regular Cheerios, right? 1 gram of sugar. So, all right, but it's straight up sugar that's going in there. Now, the other problem are the grains, and I talk a lot about grains, break them down extensively. Grains themselves, in the God form they were created, not a bad thing. Problem is, you don't find too many of those anymore. Most of it has been genetically modified, sprayed with herbicides, and then it ends up in your bowl. And Cheerios is full of it. Number one, what happens when you have these whole grain oats, right? Even this cornstarch, oat bran cornstarch, those right there are grains that they're touting to be very beneficial for cholesterol. The actual nutrient inside of those grains that are beneficial for cholesterol is called beta-glucan. And you can actually just take beta-glucan straight up. I use it in my cholesterol support supplement, my greens powder, because it has a lot of benefits of really helping lower cholesterol levels from the foods that we eat. And so that's the nutrient you want. Whether it's oatmeal or Cheerios, you're taking in a lot of carbohydrates and you're taking in a lot of chemicals when you're eating these regularly because they're genetically modified foods in most cases. So that's kind of case in point number one. To get the whole grain in its real wholesome, great form into a Cheerios box, you are heating it, you are denaturing it, you are literally breaking it down and exposing it to heat, pressure, and chemicals to the extent that the nutrient value is pretty much lost. So now you're taking on a lot of sugar. You've lost most of the nutrient balance of the whole grains. And then what they have to do is they have to fortify it with synthetic vitamins. Now, they are not worried about quality here. They are not concerned about the chemical makeup of it. They are just pounding in B vitamins and minerals. And there's a big difference between a very synthetically made B vitamin and how your body uses it, a very synthetically made zinc or magnesium, as opposed to one that your body can truly really absorb because it's attached to a proper thing, to a delivery system that your body can actually use. So they're foreign. So we don't normally get the response and the nutrient value when we fortify them. So you'll see this big long list typically on either one of these boxes of fortified vitamins. I stay away from those. I want them real as we can get. Nothing wrong with vitamins themselves, but there's a lot of synthetic vitamins that are dumped in here. Now, here's the other big thing, the grain. So it's pressurized, the nutrients are lost, so they fortified, right? The second big problem here with this grain is the glyphosate. In fact, Food Democracy Now! It's an advocacy group, and they did testing on a whole bunch of different cereals. And they looked at 29 different popular processed cereals, including Cheerios. And they were looking for detectable levels of a herbicide called glyphosate. This is one we want to watch out for. In fact, I test every single supplement I make and formula I make. We test specifically for glyphosate itself because you can have acceptable levels, right? There isn't really an acceptable amount of glyphosate you want in your system. In fact, Monsanto, which is the maker of a lot of the, most of the seeds that are producing the corn and the whole grains in our world, they're genetically modifying the seeds. So kind of a whole other conversation there of when you put a genetically modified organism into your body, what does it do to your genetics? I think it's like one of those kind of like cigarette type things, like we're doing it in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and then we're gonna find out how bad it was down the road because we're messing with the chemical makeup of the actual nutrient, how our body uses it. Dicey game, and there are some known side effects that are starting to come out about that. Now, the other side of it is they're making that seed, and then they have to spray it with this herbicide, trying to allow the plant to grow and get as much out of the crop as they can. I understand from a farmer standpoint what they're doing. That glyphosate, that residue ends up, and Monsanto is the maker of it. Roundup is the main one, and they got found in a court of law. They lost a $100 million lawsuit proving that exposure to glyphosate created a man's lymphoma, cancer. They lost in a court of law, opened up Pandora's box for lawyers putting advertisements on TV and saying, hey, if you've been exposed to glyphosate, you are entitled to a claim as well. So that's this. In the court of law, we have now proven that glyphosate, with a company that's got a lot of money to defend themselves, has now caused this issue. So glyphosate going in, they actually measured this and they looked at it, and popular foods were much higher readings, Cheerios on the list, and high levels of glyphosate being in it. So the reason I tell you this with Cheerios is because sometimes they'll make it with non-GMO ingredients. You're like, oh, look, it's non-GMO, Dr. Livingood, but they're still finding all the glyphosate on. That's why I think it's very important. When you are eating greens, we've got to understand if it's from an organic source, way less of a chance that glyphosate ends up there. And at least a non-genetically modified, but that doesn't guarantee that the glyphosate doesn't end up in your children, which is linked to blood disorders like cancer. So something we got to pay attention to. Back to our label. Let's keep going. So we've hit the oats. We got 12 grams of sugar in the honey nut. So maybe you're picking the normal version, right? We got cornstarch, we got whole grain, we're getting glyphosate through those. We got fortified vitamins that are synthetic. And then now next up is the canola oil that's put in. The regular doesn't have it, but the honey nut does. So let's break that down. And I also want to look at this tripotassium phosphate. Now, when we go to canola oil, they created a canola oil plant now, but coming up when this was invented, there wasn't a thing such as a canola plant. It comes from a rapeseed, okay? And to get that seed to oil form, a whole ton of processing has to be done. And within that processing is what makes canola oil extremely toxic. It's got a high smoke point. You can heat it up. It's very cheap to make. So I understand why so many people are using it, but it's got touted as this very heart-healthy oil, but it is very far from that, and here's the reasons why. The name gets its origin out of Canada. It's a Canadian oil. It's Canada that took the first part of that word, ola, another word for oil, combined them together, and so they made this fictitious oil. Number one out of the gates is most of the rapeseed is genetically modified. Over 95% of the rapeseed is genetically modified organisms. So right out of the gate there, we got a man-made product that this is coming from. Number two is how they extract the oil. They use a hexane extractant. So you're literally using hexane to extract that oil from the plant to use it. That's going to end up in the oil, no matter what way you dice it. The residues end up in the oil. It's very economical for them to do it this way, but they have to use a chemical to extract the oil out. The main issue, outside of being genetically modified, outside if it's processing with hexane, number 3, the big one, is its omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. It's got a very high omega-6 to omega-3. Why does that matter? The more omega-6s that we eat from seed oils, like a rape seed, okay, the more inflammation goes up in our body. So the gap between omega-6 and omega-3 is one of the major predictors, all the way back to the 1960s, where this research comes from, of how much inflammation is in your body. The amount of inflammation in your body is going to impact your heart, which is one of the leading indicators of heart-related problems. In fact, when we do blood work, and in my book, Livingood Daily, I teach people, get this type of blood work for your heart to know if you have a problem before you have a problem. And one of the things we're measuring is inflammation and its specific damage on the heart. You can check out the videos on cholesterol that I posted up here. It'll go into those blood tests in order to get checked for you to monitor it. But the high omega-6s, lots of inflammation. Omega-3 is going to lower inflammation. Omega-6 is going to inflame you more. So the more that we eat this, the more inflamed we are, the less we eat of the omega-3s. So the balance really is to lower the omega-6 seed oils and raise the omega-3 fish oil animal source of the omega-3 to cut the inflammation down. So back to our Cheerios, we've got inflammation, we've got glyphosate, we've got sugar, we've got synthetic vitamins, and we've got grains that have lost their nutrients. So you can see the problems mounting here with why this is a problem being touted as a heart-healthy food and having that heart on the box. Now, next thing to note is tripotassium phosphate. Let's break down this little guy, because sometimes these things get in there and you're like, phosphate, that's kind of natural, right? So the next ingredient to look at is tripotassium phosphate, all right? Now, small amounts in the cereal, some will just say, no big deal. It doesn't really matter to me. It's a form of potassium and it's phosphate and, it's made with salts. And so I'm not too concerned with it. But the research shows that the more phosphate you ingest, and this is kind of the buildup factor because it's Cheerios for breakfast, it's fast food for lunch, it's packaged foods for dinner, all of them containing forms of either a sodium phosphate, potassium phosphate, a lot of phosphate starts to build up in the system. And why that's a concern and why packaged food has been proven again and again and again to be linked to a lot of diseases is it's very hard on the kidneys. It's also very counterintuitive for bone health. So with the kidneys, consuming too much of this actually has been shown in studies, if your kidneys are already compromised, it's going to damage the blood vessels even further. It's going to cause even more abnormal calcium buildups. So if you're struggling with kidney issues, tripotassium phosphate is a good one to be eliminating in all types of food. Is going to be eating a bowl of Cheerios once a day, and this is the only form of it that's going to get you in trouble? Probably not, but over time that continues to add up more and more and more. Other studies show that this chemical being found in foods, tripotassium phosphate, linked to demineralization of the bones. And so if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, this is not the best foods to be going in. And then get this, people with heart conditions taking in too much phosphate circulating in your body increases the risk of heart disease for people with and without kidney disease. If you already have kidney disease, even worse. So it's directly associated with the condition that Cheerios puts on the front of the box. Too much phosphorus in the system, not a good idea. It's not that we shouldn't have any phosphorus, but taking it in these amounts because it's an anti-caking agent, it gives some better texture to the cereal. That's why they're putting it in there, for that experience of a Cheerio. But you're experiencing symptoms on the back end. All right, Dr. Livingood, I can see the problems with Cheerios. I want to control my cholesterol. I enjoy that. It's an easy snack to give my kids, to give them cereal. What can we do instead? I'm not going to leave you hanging, right? So this is all about making food simple. So you can eat whatever you want to eat as long as you're willing to understand how to make it healthy. So let's get an option for a healthier Cheerios. I have no ties to this, but check this one out, right? Honest O's. Love the name out of the gates. Barbara's Honest O's. All right, Barbara, I'm interested. Remember, don't read the nutrition facts panel. Go to the ingredient label. If there's anything I'm going to keep teaching you, let's go there. So let's go there. Honest O's in the front, we got the USDA organic symbol. This can be non-genetically modified, and that glyphosate should be non-existent if that seal is on there. So let's flip it over. You go to the side panel here. I'm going to zoom into there. Organic whole grain oat. What's that mean? No glyphosate. Non-genetically modified. Now we're actually getting the whole grain oats. Oh, that's a step up. Organic corn being used instead of just the cornstarch. Same criteria. No glyphosate, and we're getting those whole grains. We're actually getting the nutrients out of the grains if there is any. Corn doesn't have very many, so that's why I'm not a huge lover of it. But for this sake, if you want an identical to Cheerios, here you go. Organic oat bran, again, there's your beta-glucan. I would just prefer to take the beta-glucan if that's what you're trying to get from a cholesterol perspective, the benefit to your heart. Just take beta-glucan. There's links for those. Organic apple juice concentrate, cool, I'm good with that. We got a little sea salt, actually a good idea if it's sea salt and not table salt. Sea salt is needed, table salt is not. A little bit of baking soda. Watch my video on YouTube about baking soda and all its amazing benefits. So this one checks out. This would be a great option. And it's, it looks like that one. There's Barbasanus O's, or this one, and there's a couple different versions of it. I like that seal. I like that non-GMO label down in the corner down here. That matters. That means something. Barbara is paying attention. So there's a good option for a cereal of what to eat to still get some of those benefits. Let's keep going. Here's another cereal option just to give you, if you are a cereal lover, check this brand out. So this one is one that we will eat at the Livingood household sometimes. And the reason that I like it, again, no affiliation with it. If you want to learn how to get this, I put an Amazon link in the description so you can click to it. But it is keto friendly. And what's really interesting about the cereal that they really kind of cracked the code here of how do we make a cereal with the crunch. I put the honey graham one up here because it'd be the closest to like a honey nut Cheerio, but without sugar, 0 grams of sugar, a healthy source of protein, which is kind of cool, and a lot of fiber to counteract any kind of blood sugar spikes. Very interested when I first saw it. Then I dug into the ingredients, right? Flip it over. Let's go to the labels. Non-GMO certified. I'm liking what I'm seeing out of the gates there, okay? Does not mean that there couldn't be some glyphosate in here, but we do have a kosher seal as well. So they're at least paying attention to these. So it's a step up, right? And so then let's look at their flour blend. It's a pea protein, no problems with those. We got a potato fiber. All right, it's the fiber of the potato, so we should have a decent amount, of dietary fiber in this. That's good. Non-GMO corn fiber, so we're using fiber from that. That is meaning is resistant form of corn fiber, which in studies actually show has very minimal effect on your blood sugar. Way different than straight up corn. Chicory root, that's actually a good prebiotic, so I'm okay with that. Guar gum, no issues there. Okay. This is not something you're pounding down all the time, but it's meeting the test. Tapioca flour made from a root, gonna have some good prebiotics as well as a flour impact there. We got high oleic sunflower oil. Now sunflower oil can sort of trip some people up. If it's regular sunflower oil, it's gonna be again high in the omega-6s, low in the 3s. But the high oleic balances that out, has a much better ratio, and is way less inflammatory. So they paid attention to that kind of detail of not just throwing sunflower oil in there, but it must say high oleic or organic sunflower oil to pass the test. So I liked seeing that. We got baking powder again. We talked to that. Some natural flavors. When it comes from a company like this, it is non-GMO. They're paying attention to these things. I don't have that big of a problem with natural flavors because it's going to taste good, right? But I mean, you got to watch out for some of these in a very shady company, a company that's not paying attention to non-GMO type things or organic type things. Calcium carbonate, I don't have an issue there. And we got some stevia in order to sweeten it up. So let's look at the impact. 14 grams of carbs. If you're on a weight loss journey, cholesterol journey, blood pressure journey, that's not ideal to see. However, you got 9 grams of fiber. So you subtract the fiber from the carbs. So now we're only looking at 5 grams of carbs, which is around 1% of your daily value, 2% of your daily value. So you're doing really good there. And you got 11 grams of protein from that pea protein. A little bit of nutrients. So not bad, not bad if you're going to have one. So if you need that crunch, Catalina might be the thing for you. Again, there's a link there. No affiliation, but there's an Amazon link where you can head over and check that out. So some options here for the alternatives of this guy. And so don't let the front of the box fool you. Always flip it over and go to the ingredients. Be very leery of the types of grains and additives going on in there. You don't need all this extra stuff. It's just creating more problems over time. And there are some excellent alternatives out there for you to make food simple. Pass this one on, especially for those eating it for cholesterol or mamas feeding it to the littles already at a young age, taking in glyphosate, taking in sugars, taking in these extra chemicals. What does that lead to down the road, right? No one's gonna do that study, so let's just start making choices now that are gonna be beneficial for our health. If you are struggling with a heart-related condition, you wanna know more of these. How do I understand the blood work you were talking about? How do I dig deeper into my cholesterol? How do I actually make an impact and protect my heart long-term? I put a video next up right here for you, and I'll keep bringing you more ways to make health simple in general. Another great episode of Eat This, Not That. Check out this next video right now, and any of the links I referenced are in the description.